President Trump has said that that's it. We're sending troops to Chicago, whether they like it or not.
Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now. Parts of Los Angeles are terrible.
I'm aware that the President of the United States likes to go on television and beg me to call and ask him for troops. I find this extraordinarily strange, as Chicago does not want troops on our streets.
But then the president threw a curveball.
Do we go to Chicago, or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad.
Joining us now from New Orleans, James Carville, the veteran Democratic strategist and agitator. So, James, for all the media criticism of Trump and the troops and the National Guard and FBI agents, he's portrayed as the crime fighter, and now he says he may send the troops to where you are, New Orleans. Why?
Well, if he does, he would learn something. Our crime rate is actually, I think, at almost a century low. It's dropping pretty fast, and we've had state police deployed in New Orleans before. So if he wants to come down here and learn how to successfully fight crime, as President Clinton and Joe Biden did with the crime bill in 1994, then we'd be glad to welcome him. And what really helps fighting crime, honestly, are fewer guns and more cops. It's a pretty simple formula.
Is there any question in your mind that Democrats are being completely outplayed on the crime issue, almost to the point of denying it's a big issue or the numbers are down and that kind of thing? Because if you're a carjacked, you don't care what the statistics say.
Well, first of all, you kind of do. And I just saw a poll in New Orleans where crime is down is an issue. In other words, when the crime drops, people do feel it somewhat. But it's an idiotic argument to say it's not a problem, because people face it in their everyday lives. But we do know there are things that work. And as opposed to doing something that's just all for show, implement things that work. More policemen. 100,000 cops would do a lot more good than 5,000 guardsmen who are not trained to fight crime.
You say in the New York Times that the Democratic Party is, and I quote, in shambles, a cracked out clown car. So the media portrayal is right. But is that in part because there's no national spokesman for the Dems going up against a president who dominates the news cycle?
Well, there's not going without power. It's hard to have a spokesman. So I don't think we can. It's possible for us to have a spokesman now until we have a presidential nominee. And while I stand by every word I said, everybody will have to acknowledge something. We have not lost an election since November of 2024. And we're not just winning elections around the country. We're overperforming by 15, 20 points. So I think I think Virginia and New Jersey, I'm just going to say it flat out, are going to be big Democratic wins. And when people see that, they'll warm up a little bit in attitudes toward the Democratic Party. But I don't like the Democratic Party right now because they lost. And I don't like being in a losing party.
And do you think the Democratic Party has moved too far left, too concerned with pronouns and things of that nature?
No. I think they did. I think they're trying to pull back as fast as they possibly can. I think that 95% of the people in the party realize this was an idiotic, giant mistake. As I said, the three dumbest words in the history of the English language would defund the police. And I think there's a recognition of that. And how, if you look at Senator Slotkin, who is probably as good a manifestation of what I think a great Democrat should be, is saying we got to rally together. We have to fight this. And I agree. The time to air our ideological differences are not right now. It's in the presidential election of 2028.
Turning to the RFK hearings, James, Republicans as well as Democrats, as you know, were joining in beating up on RFK over, firing neutral scientists and putting in people who are either vaccine skeptics or outright anti-vaxxers. Why do you think Trump has let him run wild all these months when his greatest first-term accomplishment is Operation Warp Speed?
You know, Howie, I think you and I are one of the same thing. Is you put $10 billion in it, it actually worked, all right? I don't know. And he's caught between the protection between, because remember he tried to promote vaccines in North Alabama and they booed him down. And he's a little bit caught by wanting to tout his accomplishments, which I would say this would be a legitimate one against like making his base angry. And honestly, that's being further complicated by the Epstein fiasco. So he's in a, what they call, the British would say, a sticky wicket right here.
Do you think the Epstein fiasco, as you put it, the questions about why haven't the files been released and so forth, is hurting the president?
I do. And I think what you're seeing there is that Kentucky, Thomas Massie is coming out, teaming up with Ro Khanna and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nancy Mace, I think it was Lauren Boebert. And then you're seeing Rand Paul open fire on the national defense flank. So believe it or not, Kentucky, which we don't think a lot of in national politics within the Republican Party, is really kind of leading the charge here. I honestly believe that. And Massie and Rand Paul, they don't caucus well. They're kind of their own people.
Well, you sound at least like you have some optimism about the Democratic Party, but it's going to take a while, a little bit, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, a little
All right,
bit.
let's not get carried away. All right, James Carville, thanks very much for joining us.
I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you, sir.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.